Good morning. A few weeks ago, I pulled into the back parking lot here at church, and one of our neighbors was walking their dog on our grounds. He was new to the neighborhood, and he approached me, and we started chatting. And then he looked at the building, and he said, "Hey, what is this building?" And I said, "It's a church." And he said, "Wow, sure doesn't look like it." "What kind is it?" Well, I proudly said, "We're Unitarian Universalist." "I've never heard of that," he said. "What do you stand for?" Now, several years ago, as members of this congregation, we wrote and practiced what we called elevator speeches. They were ways that we could define and explain our faith to an individual in a succinct, short amount of time, as much as it would take to ride up 2 flights in an elevator. Now, frankly, I forgot my speech at that moment when he asked. But conveniently, there was a car in the parking lot with all the necessary bumper stickers, and I pointed out that this is, in fact, what we stand for. Now, he looked at me and he said, "You need a whole car to explain your religion? Most people just have a fish." Now, I've been thinking about that conversation for a few weeks now. And during this time of turmoil in our country, the world needs our faith, our religion, but frankly, it's complicated. Even the name of our religion is 10 syllables long. It's a mouthful, Unitarian Universalist. It's just a lot easier to say Catholic, Buddhist, Muslim. And I crave a symbol as universal as a fish and a slogan as simple as, "What would Jesus do?" And while our chalice is a wonderful symbol of our faith, it really does take a while to explain it. But I believe, in spite of all of this, that our world right now needs our message. Now, perhaps we can blame it on the media. They pretty much seem to catch all the blame these days for misconceptions we hold about the news and our world. In fact, deciphering what is true and what is fake turns out to be a full-time job. But the reality is, friends, that the Christian right has taken over the conversation about religion in this country. And that's interesting to me because statistically, they're not a singular group. Now, it's true still in 2017, well, the statistics were from 2016, that 78% of Americans identify as Christians, while only 25% of that 78% identify as evangelical. And even those individuals are not unified in their belief around social issues. For example, according to the Pew Research Center, which is a legitimate research center, 34% of evangelicals, 64% of mainline Protestants, and 52% of Catholics support reproductive rights, including the right of a woman to choose an abortion. And yet the conservative Christian voice has become dominant and privileged in our society. And I wondered, how did that happen? Well, you see, I did a little research, and it seems like beginning around 1990, politically active Christians who once called themselves the Christian right or the religious right or conservative Christians came to find those terms pejoratives, similar to the way liberals started to identify the label of liberal as a liability and call themselves progressives. The politically conservative Christians started calling themselves simply Christians. And as such, they erroneously spoke for the entire and diverse Christian faith. And you know what? They were focused, and they were active, and they were tenacious, and they were loud, and they chose single-issue advocacy, such as abortion and anti-LGBTQ rights, and they mobilized, and the misconception occurred that they represented the voice of religious America. They came to represent not only all Christians, but all legitimate religious people in the U.S. Their voice became privileged. When the media wanted to know what the religious citizens of the U.S. thought, they sought out the conservative Christians, the Christians. But in my humble opinion, this minority of religious voices somehow got the Christian message wrong. Here's an excerpt from an essay by Bill McKinnon. He's an environmental activist, and the essay is called "The Christian Paradox: How a Faithful Nation Gets Jesus Wrong." A rich man came to Jesus one day and asked him what he should do in order to get into heaven, and Jesus did not say he should invest, spend, and let the benefits trickle down. He said that what you have to do is give your money to the poor and follow me. McGibbon continues by saying, "Few plainer words have never been spoken. And yet, for some reason, the Christian Coalition of America, which was founded in 1989 in order to, in their own words, preserve, protect, and defend the Judeo-Christian values of this country, proclaimed in 2004 that its top legislative priority would be making permanent President Bush's 2001 tax cuts to preserve Christian value. By the way, the Tax Policy Center has attributed much of the rise in income inequality to the Bush administration's tax policy. On the other hand, I happen to think that we as Unitarian Universalists understand well the message that Jesus and other prophets presented, the message that tells us to feed the hungry and clothe the naked and visit the sick and invite the stranger in. It shows up in our UU principles. It's the core of our social justice work here in this church. Now, I want to be cautious here. I do not gloat or claim superiority, because saying we got it right and they got it wrong, and well, that just serves to separate us more and more. However, I believe it's essential that we add our voice to the conversation, to reclaim a religious perspective that embraces the true values of all religions, the simple golden rule to treat others as you would wish to be treated. And yet, it's sometimes hard for us as Unitarian Universalists to join in the conversation. Now, we do volunteer and march and work toward justice. We do this tirelessly. But we shy away from claiming our faith and speaking in unity. Our voice is often less focused and more secular than it is religious. I think there are reasons for this that we might explore this month as our worship theme asks us, what does it mean to be a people of identity? So we have this introductory program here at church called Starting Point. It's a program where newcomers to our community can find out more about our religion and our church. During this program, we have an exercise that we call the belief net, or the belief spectrum. We ask newcomers to place themselves on a continuum that represents their beliefs. We make statements such as, I'm a theist, I'm an atheist, and we literally ask them to stand as if there were an imaginary line and place themselves where they believe. I like to participate in the exercise because I like to agitate things just a little bit. And also, we use it to illustrate the diversity that we have within our faith. Now, there's one statement that we say that's always very interesting to me. I am spiritual, I am religious. We ask that, and invariably the whole crowd goes over to that side to be spiritual, and I'm left over here by myself being religious. But it leaves me wondering, what is it about identifying as religious that is difficult for us to accept? Why is spirituality more acceptable, more desirable? So I did a little reading, a little research, which is also part of our religion. In a book called Belief Without Borders, Linda Mercadante interviews people who claim to be spiritual but not religious. She points out that people who identify as spiritual actually have beliefs and rituals and practices that could legitimately be termed religious. They often link their existence to something larger than themselves. They deal with the same existential questions that we do, and they live their values in the world in various ways. They are searching for meaning in their life, just like us. See, it is their repudiation of the dominant Christian message that makes them shun the identity of being religious. They reject a God who is judgmental and wrathful, who oversees and intervenes in our lives. They eschew religion that is oppressive and views humans as flawed and born bad. Now, it's interesting because whether they have personally experienced this or not, they reject anything religious because that is the only religious voice that they have heard. Now, I think we as Unitarian Universalists avoid the identity as religious people for another reason as well. You see, for decades, the dominant voice in our faith has been secular humanism. It's a perspective that embraces reason and ethics and social justice as the basis of our morality, while especially rejecting religious dogma. And all that is fine, and all that is honorable and good for our community. However, I had this interesting conversation this week with a member of our church. Now, he gave me permission to tell you the story, but he asked me not to use his name. He is an atheist and a secular humanist, and he said, I don't want to be called religious because I think people who believe in God are not as smart as I am, and I don't want to be associated with that. And then he said, I am not proud of that at all. That's why we come to church. I think it's dangerous arrogance that separates us from others and limits the reach of our voice as a community of faith. Now, you may be sitting there thinking, we'd be better off, Tina, if the country abandoned religion for spirituality and secular rationality. But it's not going to happen. Like it or not, we are a religious nation for the foreseeable future. We are a Christian nation. It is the way we define ourselves as a country. The question is, though, what kind of Christian nation are we, and who has the authority to define it? It's clear to me that a progressive religious voice is needed now more than ever because this is what our religion has to offer to this country and the world. I want to paraphrase some words from a UU minister, Scott Alexander. These may sound familiar to you. In a world with so much hatred and violence, we have a religion that proclaims the inherent worth and dignity of all people. In a world with so much brutality and fear, we have a religion that seeks justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. In a world with so many people abused and neglected, we have a religion that calls us to accept one another and encourage one another to spiritual growth. In a world with so much tyranny and oppression, we have a religion that affirms the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process. In a world with so much inequity and strife, we have a religion that strives toward a goal of a world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. In a world with so much environmental degradation, we have a religion that advocates respect for the interconnected web of all existence. In a world with so much uncertainty and despair, we have a religion that teaches our hearts to hope and our hands to care. Yes, the world needs our voice. It needs us to speak as a religious authority, defining the values and morals that advance humankind and our natural world. But friends, we also need our religion. Our times are extraordinary. We are being called to support our principles at every turn, lest our way of life, our future, our freedom as people of this country is compromised. Together as a liberal religious movement, our voice is stronger and carries a gravitas that no singular voice can declare. We claim a theological grounding in justice, equity, and compassion that dates back decades. Standing alone is exhausting. Standing together, we expand our spiritual capacity to be present in troubling times. Our religious principles offer us a moral foundation on which to rest and find sustenance. Our connection to one another and to our religion sustains us for the long haul, and this is going to be a long haul. And when we are spent and exhausted, standing together gives us time to rest, because others are there to continue the resistance, and they are there to hold us up. And when we are rested, we will take up the mantle for them. Now, I have to admit that writing a sermon during these past several weeks has been challenging. I feel like I begin most mornings with whiplash. I go to bed and I have an idea about what I'd like to share with you, and I wake up in the morning and it's a new reality. My morning prayer way too often begins with, "What the?" You can fill in the blank. But this is what I know. In the midst of the turmoil that is our country and our world, babies are born right now. And people die right now. Couples pledge their love to one another while others part ways. We argue, we make up, we find joy, we feel sadness. Children grow and leave us, and sometimes they come back. We love one another as best we can. This is the breath of our religious community. It breathes through us and among us each day. It sustains us imperfectly at best. It is the breath that animates our voice in the world. I am Unitarian Universalist. I am a religious person, and my voice matters, and I will use it with the strength of my community and my religion to make a difference in this world. If you are with me, claim this awesome identity. Become the religious voice of reason and love. Own your identity as a person of religion, as a Unitarian Universalist, and keep talking. Together, we stand behind the banner of justice, equity, and compassion. Together, we change the world. May it be so, and amen.